We live in a world where everything is advertised. A reward for a missing dog, a new phone, a dream vacation, a miracle cure. Every single day, we're surrounded by advertisements designed to manipulate us, to sell products, fuel desires, and exploit our deepest needs, fears, and insecurities. Advertising has become so deeply woven into our lives that we barely notice it anymore, until one advertisement appeared online. An advertisement unlike anything the internet had ever seen, and far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Every sentence peeled back another layer of something deeply sinister. The deeper you read, the more it exposed desires so depraved, so profoundly inhuman. Written in plain words was an invitation for someone willing to become the victim of a sexually motivated, cannibalistic dinner. As shocking as the advertisement already was, the response to it was even more horrifying. It sent chills down people's spines. Someone had willingly answered the ad. This wasn't a victim being hunted. This was a person desperately searching for a predator. Someone who eagerly wanted to become the victim of a cannibal. He wanted to be consumed. He wanted to watch his own flesh become part of another human being. To him, a cannibalistic dinner date was not an act of horror, but the ultimate fulfillment of his darkest sexual desire. This is the story of two cannibals who connected in real life through a disturbing advertisement posted on the internet, driven by a shared desire to fulfill their darkest fantasies. Yes, those were the kinds of advertisements people actually posted on a disturbing website known as the Cannibal CAFÉ. But the most terrifying part wasn't the advertisements themselves. It was the existence of the website. Operating in plain sight, it served as a gathering place where people openly shared their darkest fantasies and most disturbing desires. Even more unsettling were the people behind the posts. Many weren't there out of curiosity. They were genuinely fascinated by cannibalism, actively seeking others who shared the same violent obsessions and deeply disturbing fantasies. But the horror didn't end with the advertisements. It continued in the conversations that followed. Hidden behind anonymous usernames were discussions no human mind should ever have. They spoke of human flesh and organs with an obsession that blurred the line between hunger and sexual desire. To them, the pain of a living victim wasn't an act of cruelty. It was the ultimate expression of pleasure. And it didn't end there. They discussed recipes, the perfect cut of flesh, how it should be seasoned, which wine should accompany the meal. Every detail was planned, as though they were preparing an elegant dinner. They called it a cannibal date. For those consumed by these unspeakable fantasies, the Cannibal Café wasn't just another internet forum. It was a sanctuary, a place where the desires they hid from their families, friends, and the rest of the world could finally be spoken aloud without fear. A place where the impossible no longer seemed like fantasy. Only a matter of finding the right person. It was a night consumed by relentless rain. Thunder cracked across the sky as violent winds battered the sprawling mansion. Inside, the only sound, louder than the storm, was the furious argument between a husband and wife. their furious screams echoing through every hallway of the enormous estate. A lavish bungalow with more than 40 rooms, each one amplifying the chaos. Even after nearly an hour, when the husband's voice finally fell silent, the woman refused to stop. Her relentless shouting continued to pierce the darkness.
That woman was Waltraud Meiwes, Armin Meiwes' mother.
She was known for her stubborn and domineering personality, often clashing with her husband, Dieter Meiwes, a police officer. Their marriage was marked by constant conflict, and this toxic environment became the world into which Armin Meiwes was born.
Waltraud had children from previous relationships, meaning Armin grew up with older half-brothers. But the family didn't stay together for long. After his parents divorced, Armin's half-brothers left home one by one. By the time he was around 8 years old, they were all gone, leaving him alone with his mother inside the enormous mansion. After the divorce, Waltraud Meiwes took complete control over her youngest son, Armin Meiwes. She dominated nearly every aspect of his life, making decisions on his behalf and raising him to become emotionally dependent on her.
According to accounts from those who knew the family, Waltraud had a controlling personality, and her marriages were marked by constant conflict. Both of her former husbands later cited mental cruelty as a major reason their relationships ended.
Her third husband, Dieter Meiwes, claimed that Waltraud had initially said she did not want another child, but later became pregnant because she believed it would bind him more tightly to the marriage. He also described her as intensely possessive, saying she wanted to control every aspect of family life and expected her husband to follow her wishes without question, leaving him with little personal freedom. As her marriage collapsed, that same controlling behavior became focused almost entirely on Armin, shaping the isolated childhood that would later define his life. In 1969, when Armin was just 8 years old, his father left the family, and his older half-brothers soon followed. Overnight, the lively household became eerily quiet. Years later, Armin recalled feeling very lonesome after they were gone.
Before the divorce, life had been very different. Armin spent time with his father and half-brothers, playing outdoors, building tree houses and riding horses. But after they left, those happy moments disappeared. Alone in the enormous mansion with his mother, the laughter was replaced by silence.
Although Waltraud cared for Armin's physical needs, many accounts describe her parenting as deeply controlling. Rather than encouraging independence, she kept Armin closely attached to her, making him increasingly isolated from the outside world. The joy and companionship he had once known slowly gave way to loneliness.
To escape that loneliness, Armin turned to books. Reading became his refuge, allowing his imagination to take him far beyond the empty halls of his home. But hidden among those stories were ideas that would leave a lasting impression. Fairy tales, such as Hansel and Gretel, with its witch who planned to eat children, and adventure novels like Robinson Crusoe, which included references to cannibalism, became some of his earliest exposures to the concept. They were only fictional stories, but for a lonely child with an increasingly vivid imagination, they marked the beginning of a much darker chapter in his life.
As a child, Armin was also exposed to meat and animal slaughter at an unusually early age. During summer vacations in the rural village of Wusterfeld, he watched neighbors slaughter cattle, poultry, pigs, and deer. He was even taught how to gut small animals such as rabbits. While this was a normal part of rural life, it gave him an early familiarity with the realities of flesh and butchery. By the age of 8, Armin's world had completely changed. His father had abandoned the family. His older half-brothers were gone. His grandmother had died, and he had also lost his first pet cat. Looking back, he described himself as feeling very lonesome. With almost no close friends and an increasingly isolated life at home, the loneliness only deepened.
To cope with that isolation, Armin retreated into his imagination. He invented an imaginary younger brother named Frankie, inspired by a classmate named Frank. Frankie became the companion he never had, and brother who would always be there. As Armin grew older, however, those fantasies became increasingly disturbing. Around the age of 12, his imaginary world began to revolve around cannibalism. He later described fantasies in which he would eat his imaginary brother so that he would never leave. For Armin, the act was not driven by hatred or violence in his imagination. Instead, it reflected a deeply distorted desire to prevent abandonment and keep someone with him forever. These fantasies, born from years of isolation and emotional dependence,
Would later become one of the darkest warning signs in his life.
As Armin entered his teenage years, his life looked very different from that of other boys his age. While his peers spent weekends going to parties, dance clubs, and dating, Armin remained isolated. He developed ordinary romantic and sexual attractions toward women, but his relationships never progressed in a healthy way. Beneath those feelings, his long-standing fantasies about possession and consumption continued to grow.
One of the biggest obstacles was his mother. Whenever Armin brought a woman home, Waltraud would often interfere, dismissing potential partners because she believed they were not good enough for her son. She was highly controlling and deeply involved in his personal life. She wanted an ideal daughter-in-law who could never truly compete with the role she held in Armin's life. Whether through criticism or constant interference, his chances of forming an independent relationship were repeatedly undermined. In 1980, at the age of 19, Armin joined the German army. Because he was stationed close to home,
He continued living with his mother instead of gaining real independence.
military life suited him well. The strict discipline and structured routine felt familiar after growing up under an extremely controlling parent who dictated nearly every aspect of his daily life.
During his years in the army, however, some colleagues questioned his sexuality because he never seemed to have a visible romantic relationship. Armin claimed he had a fiancée who lived in another town, but no one ever met or saw her. On one occasion, he even asked a fellow soldier whether he thought he was gay. The soldier simply replied, "You'll have to figure that out on your own."
Not everything about his military service was negative. Armin developed a passion for sailing through other enlisted soldiers, discovering one of the few hobbies that genuinely brought him enjoyment. In total, he served 12 years. In September 1999, after a prolonged illness, Armin Meiwes' mother, Waltraud, died. Her death marked the end of the most dominant relationship in his life. By all accounts, his grief appeared genuine. He cried, mourned her loss, and inherited the family's massive estate. For the first time, he was completely alone in the 40-room mansion that had defined his childhood.
Afterward, Armin worked as a computer technician, living a quiet and isolated life. Although he occasionally visited a local brothel known as the Blue Moon, he reportedly spent little time interacting with anyone, and often ended up drinking until he passed out at the bar. Despite finally being free from his mother's control, he never learned how to build meaningful relationships or escape the loneliness that had followed him since childhood. During his years in the military, the disturbing fantasies that had begun in adolescence had largely faded into the background. But after leaving the army and following his mother's death, they returned with increasing intensity. He spent more time online, exploring increasingly extreme fantasies and searching for communities that shared his interests. Around the turn of the millennium, as internet forums became more accessible, Armin discovered a website known as the CANNIBAL CAFÉ. Unlike ordinary discussion boards, this site attracted people who openly discussed cannibalistic fantasies. Some users even posted advertisements claiming they wanted to be eaten, often describing bizarre scenarios in disturbing detail. For Armin, the website appeared to offer something he had never believed possible. Not just people who understood his fantasies, but individuals who claimed to share them. It was there that he would eventually encounter the man who would become the prey in one of the most infamous criminal cases of the internet era. Armin received dozens of replies to his online posts, but almost all of them came from people who were only interested in fantasy or role-playing. Still convinced he would eventually find someone willing, Armin returned to the Cannibal Café under the alias Frankie. It was there that he came across a post from Bernd Brandes, using the online name Cater99, who claimed he was looking for someone to kill and eat him. Bernd Jürgen Brandes, born on the 19th of January 1958 in Berlin. He was the only child of a wealthy family. His father was a physician, and his mother was an anesthesiologist. But his childhood took a tragic turn when his mother died by suicide, reportedly after a medical error led to a patient's death. The loss left Bernd struggling with anxiety, and his difficult relationship with his stepmother further affected his emotional development. Academically, Brandes was exceptionally talented. He excelled in mathematics, fine arts, and swimming before earning degrees in control engineering and electrical engineering. He joined Siemens and eventually rose to an executive position as a division chief in Berlin. From the outside, Bernd appeared successful. He had a well-paying job, stayed physically fit, and was described by co-workers as friendly, cheerful, and enjoyable to work with. But privately, he struggled with loneliness and unresolved personal conflicts. A long-term relationship with a woman ended after she discovered his attraction to men. Although he continued dating both men and women, he never found lasting happiness. By the age of 43, Brandes had developed extreme fantasies centered on cannibalism and sexual mutilation. Brandes was suffering from a severe psychiatric disorder and a strong desire for self-destruction. He began searching online for someone willing to fulfill those fantasies, bringing him to the Cannibal Café, where his path would eventually cross with Armin Meiwes.
Okay, listen. Yeah. Fired up, but we move like water. They know me as the crazy one. Eyes don't lie, lyrics turn into slaughter. Anything can happen, don't make me one. Always just look at that when they know what they lost and they're trying to get it back, but the energy's mad.
For Brandes, this was the moment he had been waiting for. After years of hiding his darkest thoughts, he had finally found someone who appeared to share them. Armin Meiwes wasn't just another stranger from the internet. He was someone willing to take those fantasies beyond words. The two connected and had long, in-depth conversations on Hotmail about their shared dark fantasies. They discussed what they believed would be the best way to carry out the killing, how to butcher the body, how to preserve the flesh for a long time, and how they planned to consume it with seasonings, wine, and other accompaniments. They even bought a video camera and agreed to record the entire event. Every tool they believed they would need was freshly gathered, and everything was set for the day they had planned. They even planned to buy painkillers and sleeping pills to reduce the intense pain during the act, along with strong alcohol to help numb it further. Throughout these preparations, Brandes had several very specific wishes. One was that he wanted Armin Meiwes to bite off his manhood while he was still alive and conscious. He also wanted them to eat it together, seasoned and accompanied by wine. In addition, Brandes wanted to experience a slow, painful death before finally consenting to be killed and consumed by Armin.
Everything was set for the big day. After settling on a plan with Meiwes, Brandes sold all of his belongings, wiped his computer's hard drive, and bought a one-way train ticket to Rothenburg.
Meiwes picked him up at the station. Originally, Meiwes had planned for Brandes to stay with him for a few days so they could get to know each other, but Brandes insisted the slaughter should take place that very day. On their way home, they stopped at a pharmacy to buy painkillers and sleeping pills.
Finally, they arrived at Meiwes' house in Wusterfeld. Once inside, Brandes stood in the living room, removed his clothes, and told Meiwes that he could take a look at his dinner. They then spent several hours cuddled together, before setting up video equipment to record what they had planned.
While Brandes was convinced that his long-held desire was finally about to be fulfilled, Armin Meiwes prepared 6 knives, a hatchet, and a meat grinder. He had also downloaded and translated a step-by-step guide on butchering a human body, using it as a reference for what he intended to do. The pact had been made. Armin Meiwes was to tear off Bernd Brandes' manhood with his own teeth, while Brandes remained fully awake and conscious. The room fell into an eerie silence. What was about to unfold wasn't just disturbing. It was something almost impossible to imagine. To prepare himself for the unimaginable pain, Brandes swallowed a handful of sleeping pills and washed them down with alcohol, hoping they would dull the agony that awaited him. Then Meiwes leaned in. He bit down with all his strength, trying to rip the flesh away. But the human body wasn't so easily torn apart. His attempt failed. Without a word, desperation turned into cold determination. Meiwes reached for a knife. As the blade cut through the flesh, blood poured across the room. Brandes screamed in unbearable agony, his body twisting violently as waves of blinding pain surged through him. But beneath those screams was something even more disturbing. Brandes wasn't horrified. He was disappointed. The pain wasn't as overwhelming as he had imagined. For him, suffering itself was part of the fantasy. He had long associated extreme pain with intense sexual gratification, and the reality failed to match the expectations he had built in his mind. Afterward, the 2 men attempted to eat the severed flesh raw. But it proved nearly impossible. It was too tough, too rubbery. Brandes later described it as chewy. Determined to continue, Meiwes seasoned it with salt, pepper, garlic, and wine. Then fried it in a pan, along with some of Brandes' own body fat, hoping it would become edible. Instead, it burned beyond recognition. Neither man could eat it. Brandes was now losing an enormous amount of blood. His body had grown pale, and he complained that he was freezing. Hoping to keep him alive, Meiwes helped him into a hot bath. The warm water quickly turned crimson as blood continued to pour from the devastating wound. By then, Brandes was far too weak from blood loss to eat any of his own manhood flesh. Disappointed, he reportedly looked at Meiwes and said, "If I hold out until morning, we can still have my balls for breakfast. You get one, I get one." The remark was as surreal as it was horrifying. Not long afterward, Brandes attempted to climb out of the bathtub on his own. He barely made it before collapsing unconscious onto the floor. Meiwes carried his limp body into what he called the slaughter room and laid him on a bed. For the next several hours he watched as Brandes drifted in and out of consciousness, slowly bleeding to death. In a chilling display of detachment, Meiwes passed the time by reading a Star Trek novel while waiting.
Nearly 3 hours later, after wrestling with the decision, Meiwes finally picked up a knife. Then, with a single cut across Brandes' throat, he ended his life.
filled the room. With Brandes dead, Meiwes began the next stage of his plan with precision. He severed the head, suspended the body from a meat hook, removed the internal organs, and split the body in half. Each cut of meat was sealed in bags and hidden beneath the false bottom of a freezer, where it would remain for months. The bones were later buried in the garden surrounding the farmhouse.
The entire incident, from the first moments of the encounter to the final stages afterward, was captured on nearly 4 hours of videotape. The recording has never been released to the public because of its gruesome and disturbing contents.
For Meiwes, the killing wasn't driven by anger or revenge. It was the fulfillment of a long-held sexual fantasy. He later admitted that consuming another human being brought him intense gratification. To him, it wasn't just about eating flesh. It was about possessing another person completely.
After repeatedly eating portions of Brandes' body over the following months, Meiwes claimed he had, in his words, assimilated him. He believed that by consuming Brandes' flesh, he had somehow absorbed parts of his identity. His delusion went even further. Meiwes insisted that after eating Brandes, his own English and mathematics skills had noticeably improved, as if consuming another person's body had allowed him to inherit their abilities. It was a chilling glimpse into the distorted mindset of a man who no longer separated fantasy from reality, convincing himself that by consuming another human being, he had made that person a permanent part of himself. Even before he had finished consuming the remains of his first victim, Armin Meiwes had already begun searching for another. He returned to the Cannibal CAFÉ, the underground website where he had first met Bernd Brandes. This time, however, his advertisements carried a terrifying new level of credibility. Meiwes openly hinted that he had already carried out his fantasy. To convince potential volunteers he was serious, he claimed to have first-hand experience killing, butchering, and processing a human body. Between 2001 and 2002, he reportedly arranged 30 to 40 so-called slaughter meetings with men he met online. Most of those who contacted him were between their 20s and 50s. Investigators later described many of them as well-educated professionals with stable, high-paying careers. But despite their disturbing fantasies, most lost their nerve when Meiwes proposed taking the role play into reality. They walked away before anything irreversible could happen. Some participants, particularly those involved in BDSM, allowed themselves to be restrained during meetings, believing the encounters would remain part of a consensual fantasy rather than end in real violence. Then, on July 9th, 2002, everything began to unravel. A 23-year-old university student from Austria was browsing the internet using the search terms horror and nervous thrills when he stumbled upon one of Meiwes' advertisements. Curious and deeply unsettled, he sent Meiwes an email asking a simple question: had he actually killed someone? The reply was immediate: yes. Unlike others who had dismissed the advertisements as fantasy, the student realized he might be communicating with a real killer. Horrified, he reported Meiwes' email address to German authorities, believing he had uncovered evidence of a homicide. The tip triggered an investigation. It took police nearly 2 months to trace the online identity known as Frankie back to the man behind the screen, Armin Meiwes. On December 10, 2002, German police raided Armin Meiwes' remote farmhouse. Inside the home, investigators made a discovery that confirmed their worst fears.
Hidden beneath the false bottom of a freezer were carefully packaged bags of human flesh. When officers asked Meiwes what the meat was, he calmly replied, "Wild pork."
But one of the police officers wasn't convinced.
She reportedly answered that she cooked often and whatever was inside those bags looked nothing like pork. The investigation quickly uncovered the horrifying truth. At his pre-trial hearing, Meiwes never tried to deny what he had done. Instead, he simply stated, "I always had the fantasy, and in the end, I fulfilled it." He acknowledged that society considered his actions wrong and even apologized. Yet his words revealed something deeply unsettling. He admitted that, personally, what he had done never felt wrong to him. Psychologists who evaluated Meiwes compared him to serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, describing both men as sexual cannibals. Despite the unimaginable nature of the crime, psychiatric experts concluded that Meiwes was legally sane and did not suffer from a mental illness that would remove his criminal responsibility. The following year, Bernd Brandes was finally laid to rest. His funeral was held at a secret location outside Berlin to shield his family from media attention and to prevent his grave from becoming a target for vandals or morbid curiosity.
As investigators examined Meiwes' online activity, they uncovered a contact list containing around 430 users from the Cannibal Forum. German authorities questioned those living within the country, while individuals residing abroad were generally not pursued by the investigation.
Among the evidence was a deeply disturbing letter Meiwes wrote to Brandes' boyfriend. In it, he offered his deepest condolences, but also described the killing as a beautiful death, claiming it was something Bernd had wished for over many years. During the trial, the defense built its case around one central argument. Bernd Brandes had given his full and voluntary consent. They pointed to the videotape, in which Brandes repeatedly agreed to the acts, arguing that the case should be treated not as murder, but as killing on demand. The court rejected that argument. Consent, the judges ruled, could not legally justify or excuse a killing of this nature. The prosecution's concerns were reinforced by testimony from one of Meiwes' own psychologists, who stated that he still harbored cannibalistic fantasies and believed that, if ever released, Meiwes would likely offend again. In the end, the court reached its final verdict. Armin Meiwes was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, bringing one of Germany's most disturbing criminal cases to a close.